Oh, it looks like we got out of the song.
The title of this evening's Dharma talk is Minus Your Meddling. So we'll start out with meddling. Meddling shows up lots of different ways. Anytime anything arises and you have a comment on it, that's meddling. Anytime anything goes away and you comment on that, that's meddling. Anytime you decide to not do anything about it, that's meddling. Any position is meddling. So it takes a while. Probably have time, 20, 30 years ought to do it. Look at the meddling. How do you do that? You look at the meddling without adding more meddling to try to get rid of the meddling. So you could say minus your meddling. And you know that's going to show up differently with each person because each person has their own particular style of meddling, their own style of shutting down. It might be more aggressive. It might be more subtle, so that it isn't so clear exactly the way in which you're kind of pulling the tarpaulin over the evil garden. Minus your meddling. So we have to see the meddling. So there's meddling that's happening. And when I say minus your meddling, or I say don't meddle, or don't interfere with things, don't add anything, don't do any math, no addition, no subtraction, no multiplication, no division, no dividing yourself away from anything. Pardon me. So through the sitting practice of meditation, we're able to see more clearly, more vividly, in a greater contrast the way we keep objecting to some things and agreeing with other things. And it is not wrong, so we don't want to add on something else that says that makes the meddling even more subtle or sneaky. So minus the meddling, if that meddling begins to back off just by virtue of you looking at it, just looking at that spontaneous addition coming out of your open fear or out of your wish to be in control, this is what reifies, consolidates, congratulates, and gives nutrition to the illusory nature of the self, or the narcissism, the paranoid aspect of the mind that is worried about that and really would like to get some more of that. Shows up lots of different ways. Shows up differently for each person. And there's nothing to correct, but there is something to see and understand. And we could say it this way, open up, get to know yourself. The next time you do block sitting, 4-hour block sitting, the next time you do any kind of practice at all, sit down and give everything that's moving your attention. Just give it your attention. And when you see what it's doing, just receive that. So the intention is to give it your attention, observe that, and then when it goes into motion, then just receive whatever's happening. If you're actually receiving what's happening, you will be able to, you'll be willing to, you'll be fully qualified to, you need a credential, fully qualified to not know what the hell is going on. Anytime anything is occurring and you know what it is, this is ignorance. Consider that. Don't believe it. Don't disbelieve it. Don't ignore it. But since you're here and you're giving me permission to say a few words based on what I've been doing most of my life, looking at the mind, helping others look at their mind, looking at my own confusion. So minus, if the meddling is not there, or if the meddling starts to fall away, what happens? The self-centeredness immediately starts to panic. This is when people often come to me, isn't there another practice I could do to keep from feeling like crap? It's a spiritual path. This is about the crap. This is about no longer am I going to settle for any lame excuse for anything. No longer am I going to settle for some kind of validation, justification, and all the other Asians. I'm going to do what? You might need more help. You might have to receive precepts formally. You might have to just observe them informally. Vow to be with all things, simply put. You might need help. Not easy. As I say over and over again, don't do anything unless you have to. Don't receive, observe, or try to practice the Bodhisattva's vow to be with all things. Unless you're ready to do that. If you're ready, then go in all the way. Make sure you're wearing your waders. It might be a lot deeper, a lot more. I wasn't counting on this. I wasn't bargaining for this. It can't be this stuff. Probably is. So minus, it's a subtraction, minus the meddling, but you can't just take the meddling away. You can't say, I'm no longer going to meddle, even though I'm saying, don't meddle. I know that you can't. I can't stop meddling. But something about having that kind of a teaching, that kind of a recommendation or suggestion, don't add. Just look at whatever is there. Don't interfere, either to stop it based on your ideas about it shouldn't be there, or to validate it based on your ideas that there must be some reason that I'm feeling this. What can I blame? Not drinking enough water. I'm not mocking that. Of course you should drink water. But I'm saying we tend to settle if we can find some reason behind however we're feeling. Somehow it eases that difficult feeling in such a way that, okay, well, I can do this. At least I know why this is happening. How many times have you said this to yourself? Well, at least I know why I'm feeling this way. No, you don't. If you think you know why you're feeling a certain way, this is ignorance. This is delusion. And why is it a delusion? You want me to explain? I will. There isn't anyone. So anytime you validate or dissect or discombobulate, whatever you're going to do with something to make it go this way or that way, what you're getting out of that is the feeling that at least I'm at least just more and more complicated. That's why it's so important. The way I see it is sit down, hold still, do nothing, be a minimalist, do a radical form of meditation, as radical as possible. Radical meaning root. Probably even isn't the root. This is beyond the root. It's deeper than the root. It's the very area where the self-centeredness comes together and thinks there's somebody that needs that, somebody that wants to stop that, somebody that needs to continue. So minus the meddling, when that starts to recede from being what? Observed? From being observed. From whatever's happening, if it goes left or right, gets darker, gets lighter, whatever's happening, any of the qualities that can arise as an emotion, a thought, a series of thoughts, do nothing with it. And if it starts to, you could say, do something to itself, then don't interfere, don't meddle. Let it do whatever it needs to do. Let it turn into a rainbow. Let it turn into a trash heap. Not separate. They look separate. We call them separate things. And one is very colorful and nice and sweet, and one is very confusing and mixed up and looks like are more closer to our concept of confusion or difficulty or something that is going sour. The difference is something that we impute. It's something we invent, we make up, and we add on. So if we say, going back to the title, the Dharma talk minus your meddling, what if that does? What if that begins to take hold as an understanding where you're actually not going to feel anything anymore, even though you're feeling the ego's having little threats or little paranoid headlines that say you better not do this. This is getting risky. I'm feeling very uncomfortable doing this. This is why the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha. That's why that particular structure is so important. Teaching person, what is being taught for thousands of years, and the community, not this community alone, but the lineage. So minus that, what's left? Is there something left? Something if you don't have that, is there what's happening then? What would that look like? Well, it probably would look like something was missing. It probably would look like don't have any protection, don't have any clothes on, don't have the things that used to protect you. That might be the way it shows up initially. But if you don't give up, if you're more sincere about the truth, if you want the truth at the cost of anything, then you're there. This is how it's done. We don't realize because of the meddling, the constant shifting and shifting and shifting, or blaming somebody else for how we're feeling. Even though this is the thing that I've say over and over, even though what actually happened was somebody saw it, they have it on video, you can prove that person said this to this person or did this or did that. You have relative truth right in front of you proving. This is why the whole world is confused and at war with itself, with the different parts of itself, is because the belief or the lockdown on relative truth. Relative truth is valuable, of course. We need relative truth, or we can't get the toilet to flush. You can't get your car to start. You can't get the roof to stop leaking. There's all kinds of relativity that is important within the context of that given situation. But your ultimate nature, when we start grasping at materialism, it gets obstructed, it gets obscured, it gets shut down, and we start to believe in a relative self that can win or lose. The 8 worldly dharmas of success, failure, coming and going up and down, back and forth, all the polarities, you name them, or don't. So if the meddling or the interference, we say minus the meddling, if that starts to happen, what does show up? Does anything show up? And yes, I would say yes, but it depends on your particular style. That's why this is by anyone who has an understanding of this. A teaching person who has the, whatever you call it, the wherewithal to even talk about it, won't get in the way of your awakening by describing too much how that's going to be for you. Because you may have to have some passages that you need to go through that they may have not gone through, or that other people do not have to go through. Simply put, if the teaching person is close enough to you as a student, and this can take years, but if they eventually see what your obstacles are and you don't seem to be working with them, then they will present that to you. And it might not come in the form you think. It might not come like sharp stick in the eye. It might come other ways. I've been taught in that way. Both of my teachers saw what I was dealing with and functioned with me in such a way that I considered anything they said or did as a teaching. It was difficult to do that. Without that teaching, I would not be talking like this about anything. I would not be presenting this. First few Dharma talks I gave was out of knowledge about studying the Dharma for years and years. As I said earlier today, out in the sunshine, Bardo, I don't teach out of what I know because I don't really know anything. But I teach out of what I see. So any words that are rising here are rising right out of what I'm looking at all the time. And yes, I meddle with things too. So it's, when I say don't meddle, I know you can't stop because I can't stop. I've been looking at it for a while. But what happens if you take that kind of an attitude, that as much as you can, you're not going to interfere with your own confusion or with that of anyone else's, but you will receive the person that's in front of you. The fancy word for this is love, but love is not a feeling. The kind of love that is a feeling is a grasping kind of love, wanting something, wanting to control, get some of that. You want that, and you don't want anyone else to have that. Quite a difference. We can do some questions, or I can continue to scurry around the oak tree. Okay, I'll keep scurrying. So the way in which you're observing, what's happening when you're observing the meddling part, when I say don't meddle, you'll notice that if you try to go into that and do anything with it, that's actually meddling. It's a Trunk Rinpoche called it double negativity. The first negativity is negative enough. You don't need to go in with your trying to fix it, kind of. I just got to stop doing that with more negativity. But without an awareness practice, very difficult to work with negativity other than covering it up. Or if you're not covering it up aggressively, covering it up with your passion, maybe blaming, or maybe covering it up by just distracting yourself into something else. If you're a meditator, it's going to be harder and harder to distract yourself, and more, the downside is you'll be more and more aware of your own craziness, your own mixed up kind of thought process. And I would say, do it anyway. You can do it. You can do it. Jason.
When we're meditating and we're endeavoring to observe, if we register something as a concept, is that meddling or an elaboration?
Not if it's just being registered. And then if you start to move that into some kind of a project about fixing, or a project about nailing it down, or a project, any kind of project, that would be meddling. But you may have to do some of that in order to even witness the meddling part. That's why the sitting practice of meditation, wall gazing, shikantaza, is so important, because by you're kind of using the very thing that is confusing, conditioning, to kind of change your attitude a little bit, but you're doing it very slowly and respectfully. And so sit down, hold still, watch the movement. Then that aspect of the consciousness that is has a quality of witnessing, in other words, receiving what that is, then that seems to get stronger. I don't know if we would call it a muscle, but maybe it's just the tendency that is being backed up by your conceptual understanding of the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, the 12 links. That comes together, that causes the ego mind, the self-centered mind, to think, I might want to do this. This may be a good thing to do. So it begins with the self-centeredness, but it's not separate from the mind of awakening, or bodhicitta. So it's not separate. It just looks like it is. So it looks like we've got to get rid of that, so we'll have just awakening. More.
When we look at the concepts of the 8 consciousnesses, the 6th one is thinking. Is there thoughts that are not meddling and thoughts that are meddling?
Yes.
What differentiates them?
The immediate necessity, being an independent in an area that's where you're dealing with dependent origination all the time. You're hungry, You eat. You go outside and it starts to rain. You get an umbrella. A very simple thinking in terms of the six sense fields, and being consciousness that is showing up as a living form, a human being. It's when it goes overboard and starts to get greedy about something, or gets warlike about something, or just wants to shut down and just be have less awareness about everything. It's just too painful to be aware. So when that starts to happen, and the way we get to this situation might take a lot of comings and goings, a lot of pushing and pulling and everything. It doesn't start right away. Go ahead.
I'm just wondering, when we endeavor to observe the thoughts that are meddling and are not meddling, do they all become meddled with at that point?
I don't think so. The conclusion part of it, of meddling and not meddling, it starts to get very, very personal, depending on how your own particular style. Some people are much more conceptual. They have an incredibly intense, strong overlay of concepts all the time. Other people are not, have some concepts, but mainly it's a more of an intuitive, a feeling dimension that's happening there. Those are just a couple. There's even more different ways that can break down and combine. Good.
I'm just wondering if it has anything to do with the relationship to the thoughts that creates difficulty.
Yeah, just if you have an agenda about the thoughts that are rising, have any agenda about it, that reifies or establishes belief in someone who wants things to be different or wants something else. And also going the other way and trying to just be real agreeable and just, I don't care what happens, I'm fine, just whatever happens. Sometimes we try to lecture ourselves, just be okay, just stop objecting to anything. Not that you can't do some of that, but quite often we will get carried away with that and then look for some kind of result. So no position. The positionality of the ego in terms of agenda, what it wants, what it doesn't want, is the situation that causes the intense belief in the polarity of samsara, life and death, up and down, all the 8 worldly dharmas, which are break down even further. But to not have any, to look at the greediness of the mind, to look at the jealousy of the mind, or any of those other aspects without doing anything with them, not trying to stop them, not trying to validate them because I was raised this way, or because my father treated me this way, or any number of things, or because I have a chemical whatever imbalance. And not that you couldn't have a chemical imbalance, it's possible. I'm just saying, don't validate the obvious. In other words, whatever's showing up, don't validate that. And somebody did something to someone else and it was impolite, or we tend to get on that and use that and pull that together so we can have some kind of kind of the same thing that attorneys do when they're trying to win a case. It's very similar to that, having a little counselor in your head. Yes, Junchu.
Often, if I'm feeling a particular emotion, there's a lot of discursive thoughts about it. It feels like there's someone meddling with the emotion. Who or what is meddling in that instance?
I don't know. I can't say, well, it's this or it's that. Now, some people will do that. Will point out things. And I will say to you this. Don't take your eyes off from that. Don't take your awareness away from that. And that means not only receiving it, but also don't cover it up with a name, cover it up with an idea, cover it up with a judgment, evaluation, a conclusion, and also don't believe it and don't disbelieve it. It's very much like the metaphor I often use. I'm sure there's probably better metaphors, but the one I often use is like watching a horror movie. You know it's a movie, but it's scary. You still have emotions around it, but it's a stage play. And so I sometimes say, using visual metaphors, or I say, stay in the front row. Don't leave the theater, run out screaming or something, but stay there and continue to watch how the way things seem to be so choreographed and orchestrated in such a way that they seem so convincing. And relatively, they may be convincing. But by going into that with some kind of I'm onto that, how that works, I think I can somehow stop doing that, or what? Probably not. This is why it's so important to Shikantaza is such a powerful way to train the mind, because you actually get to see what it is fundamentally, rather than what it is relatively. And what is it fundamentally? It's going to sound maybe not all that helpful, but I don't know any other way to say it other than it's not separate. You can actually see this. You can every day. Once this starts to show up, it's not likely to go away. If it goes away, then you didn't see it, because it is overwhelmingly present. It's so present that your self-centeredness, your ego, is still there. There's still a self-centeredness that functions, but it no longer is in the control room. I sometimes say it's a clown on the roof. There's still something there, but when you look at it, you realize it's in a place where it has no say-so. It's on the roof. And where it's not very convincing, it's a clown. But even those are kind of extra to do something to manipulate it. And so fundamentally, it's a way of talking about it that may help you tune into that, may not. I'm not experiencing any clowns or any roofs. But go ahead.
How do we see the unreality of that when the intensity is so strong?
So you're having the intensity. Notice how totally outlandish it is to be in a room, sitting in a chair, just having finished a cup of tea or some coffee. The weather is perfect that day, or maybe it's not, maybe it's raining a little bit. And you have this intense emotion about something that is totally happening in a realm that is not even visible. Your mind. This is why sitting in front of the wall is so powerful. It's just that it takes a while, because we have, and here again, don't believe what I'm saying, but consider it. We have for countless, even saying thousands of years is an understatement, been doing this. We've been here forever, and we keep coming back in different forms. We just all happen to be in a human form right now, but there's no guarantee that's going to continue. You may never come back into the human realm again. It's possible, but you're here now, and that's of all the 5 realms, 6 realms in the realm of desire. That's the one that, as the teachings say, that you can actually get some kind of glimpse of the truth. The rest of them, there's too much preoccupation with fighting or grasping or greed or lust or killing.
Commissioner Downing, thank you. There are a few questions from YouTube. One from Joyce Chen, who I think was tuning into Open Heart Project
Yes.
earlier today.
Hi, Joyce.
She asks, when meditating, I reflect on things that happened in the past and realized why I did things that way then. Is this one kind of meddling?
If you're holding the body still and all of your senses are open and you're meditating on a regular basis, in other words, every day or several times a week at least, for longer periods than a half an hour, if you can do longer than that, then more than likely, and this, I'd have to talk to you more about it. I'm not necessarily saying we need to talk ever again. That's up to you. But I'm saying that probably not. But what you need to do what you're doing is you're kind of aware that you're meddling. But for me to say yes, that's meddling, I would say no. I would trust your insight. I would trust you. You're the one that you need to do this. If you're here and you're listening to me, then I'm just telling you, you can do this. You can do it, but it's just going to be a lot of work. I was told by my teacher, you can do this. He did not mention how hard it was going to be. He didn't tell me how long it was going to be. He didn't tell me because he knew how lazy I was. He said, by the way, this is going to take you 35 or 40 years. And I thought, well, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to go back to doing drugs. Much easier. And I'm kidding, of course. I wouldn't do that. But in your situation, the way you describe that, the only thing I would change is, or even talk about is say, if you're holding very still and this kind of rumbling around and validating what happened and explaining yourself, just watch. And don't second the motion. In other words, I say, don't, something I said a moment ago, I can't even remember what it was, but something like don't validate the obvious. It's obvious what happened because you're looking at it. I did this because of that. But don't second it. Don't go in and say, yeah, I did that. Why did I do that? I shouldn't have done that. Yeah. If you notice it, if it shows up, that this happened because I didn't notice that before, but now I see that why that happens is like this one. That's fine. Just like reading a script for a play. Don't memorize the part. Memorize anything. You might want to memorize the 4 reminders that turn the mind towards the Dharma. You might want to memorize refuge in the Buddha, refuge in the Dharma, refuge in the Sangha, and dwell on what it means. Refuge in the Buddha means what? Turning to someone who is clear and who has no motivation to manipulate you or control you or do anything. There's no interest in making money. Refuge in the Dharma is the truth that was taught, that he taught, that the Buddha taught. Everything is dependently arisen. Nothing comes from its own side. There are no individuals anywhere. It's an incredible illusion, and it's self-perpetuating mostly. And then refuge in the Dharma, the community of people that get together from all different kinds of confusion, all different kinds of. Some are more, as I said earlier, some very conceptual constructs, and some totally not at home with that. They don't even feel comfortable. And when they're with somebody who's very conceptual, they feel put upon. They feel like, I feel kind of intimidated here. This person knows so much. When will I know that much? That's why I don't, in our book studies, I don't let someone take over and teach, even though I have a very strong understanding conceptually of what this is about. But that it's not a conceptual understanding. That's just stair steps. Some people can't find the stair steps, and they use what is called intuition. And what is intuition? It's like climbing up a rope that has been greased. That's intuition. No structure to it at all. So whatever's occurring, just observe. Even if it's, I'm doing this because of this, I'm doing this because of it. And if you can, you could consider, don't second the motion. Whatever's happening, observe, but don't jump on it with something like, I'm just going to say a few words here, like, yeah, there I go again, or yeah, that's who I am. I'm always interfering with things, we're always meddling. If you see that you're meddling, no comment. Don't reinforce the identity of a meddler. And you just have more problems. It's like, the clown has come down off the roof, has kicked in the window, and now is sitting at your lunch counter, and you didn't even know you'd opened a restaurant. We open restaurants for our confusion because we want to feed that. And why do we want to feed that kind of stuff? Because by doing that, it gives us the illusion of protection and that we are somebody who can be protected from the unknown or from the basic teachings of the Buddha, the impermanence. Nothing lasts. Everything is in a state of distress or unhappiness, discontent. I'm not saying this is not nihilism. It's not, doesn't mean you can't be okay and be happy and enjoy the sunshine. But it's a lot easier to enjoy the things that are come and go in this incredible, luminous world if you're no longer at war with anything. You're no longer at peace with anything. There's no longer a separate being. There's just consciousness only. If you're interested, then don't give up. Further questions? Sokuzan.
What is style?
Pardon me?
What is style?
Spell it.
STYLE.
Just a person's style of confusion could show up as some of the teachings in Tibetan Buddhism calls it Buddha families. The Buddha style is just to shut down and just not be too aware of anything. It's a Buddha family, so it's it takes on the look of a Buddha as someone who is no longer grasping, rejecting, or doing anything. So someone who is ignoring kind of looks like a Buddha. They don't do much. They don't respond. You can say something outlandish, and they just have the same flat look on their face. So it's more of a desolate kind of thing. They've trained themselves, maybe through being intensely persecuted or tortured. They learn how to just shut everything off. So it's called a Buddha family, or grounded in ignorance. Grounded, just not here, not really present. Present just enough to hear dinner time, to hear that. And then the other ones would be karma or action, and ratna or some kind of seduction or some kind of jealousy going on about otherness. And I'm not going to go through all that. I want to turn the talk into that, but just different ways of being crazy, of being unenlightened, of fighting with your world, fighting with your mind, fighting with others. Some kind of polarity that keeps reinforcing the otherness. And sometimes it can function in a very sweet way. Padma is very sweet, very seductive. You sometimes meet people who are just kind of overly gushy, and they're protecting themselves because then they can, you stay back away from them because they're just so sweet and nice and magnetizing you. And how are you? How are things going for you? Are you feeling okay? Good. Not that you couldn't do some of that, but you kind of know it when somebody's kind of overdoing that. There's something, shall we say, and I don't really want to pick on the fish too much, but fishy. When you laughed. Oh, others have a mask on, so maybe I should say those things with a mask on. It might help. So does that answer? Is there something else you want to ask about style? But just a different way of handling your world, you're frustrated, you handle it one way. If somebody else gets frustrated, they handle it another way. My way of handling frustration when I was young was to run as fast as I could when I was 3, roll up into a ball and aim at some aspect of the wall in the house and hit it like a cannonball. But I wouldn't really know what I was doing for sure. I knew I was doing something because I was upset, but I wouldn't know what my mother had to tell me not to do that. And the words she used made me realize what I was doing, because before that I didn't know what I was doing. She said, "Don't you throw yourself." And I thought, I'm throwing myself. That's what I'm doing. So this is a self. And perhaps you have a similar story when you were young, or maybe you didn't have that kind of frustration, but the different way of dealing with the frustration is the style part of it. And there are probably countless numbers. There's some basic styles, and one is aggression, just fight with everything, be upset with everything. And the other one is passion, grasp, collect, control, power. More?
If we see the styles of meddling, how do we receive it without fighting with it?
Just practice. Because in order to do that, you have to, it's like anything you train yourself in, maybe not like anything, but it's similar to other things that are more obvious that you train in, like, we'll say martial arts or playing Scrabble for that matter, but some way of training yourself to work with the elements that are that we need to get familiar with. So you might have to do some of that looks like you're meddling when actually you're exploring that, so that you can understand better how the kind of a knee-jerk response comes out of that to shut something down. And that's when I say trust yourself. I don't mean believe your thoughts. I'm saying trust the space in which the thoughts occur. In other words, whatever is occurring, if you can, register with the space, and instead of registering that you are that thought, see that the space in which the thoughts are occurring is doing nothing. It's not particularly even receiving anything. It's just an openness that thoughts are allowed to rise in, sometimes called a human being. It's like the traditional way of describing a human being in Buddhist terms is when the five skandhas, form, feeling, perception, concept or thinking process, and the six sense fields and their objects, smell, taste, touch, hearing, seeing, when that situation of consciousness enters the six realms of the God realm of success, the jealous God realm of competition and jealousy, the human realm of desire and suffering and curiosity, and the realm of the animals who have a limited ability to understand what's happening around them, characterized by ignorance. And then the Preta Loka, or the one where there's intense lust or greed after something. You have to have that. You have to have it, which is an intense form of passion. And then the hell realm, which the only solution for anything is to kill and murder and hit, strike out, anger. Those are the three lower realms: the animal, the Preta Loka, the jealous, the hungry ghost, grasping, and the hell realm. And it is said that just the sitting practice of meditation, you may not attain enlightenment, but you can get free of those realms, because you begin to understand that those lower realms are extremely not so good. So then you end up so a practitioner may go in there occasionally, but it's less and less, more about the human realm of curiosity, having emotions, having some suffering, maybe jealousy, other people, even other in the Sangha, even jealousy for other, other people in our situation, monks or temple residents, teachers likes this person more than she likes me, or something like that. And then the God realm is, we're really doing good. I used to be really screwed up, but I meditated for a few years, and I'm good. I'm really good. Everything is peaceful. Love, brother, that kind of thing. Constantly cranking up that kind of artificiality. That being said, that's very difficult to see the difference between that and that kind of thing like Maitri Bhavana, where you're expressing yourself, your consideration, your care for the welfare of others. There's a difference there, and I'd be happy to talk about that. I really have a question that would draw me into that, or we can talk about something else.
Jim bowing. There's a question from Susan in Traverse City.
Susan.
When witnessing clearly and deeply aware, do forms, including one's sense of body, disappear?
Good question. They change, the embodiment situation and the sense of being a person, of being I don't know how to say it other than what used to be threatened isn't there anymore. What used to be greedy is not there anymore. So consciousness is still here, but the consciousness, the awareness that is still here is not separate from anything. It's interesting because that lack of the imputed separation between yourself and others has changed into a different kind of separation called respect. That you really, really respect it. You've been through so much yourself, so much difficulty yourself, that when you see someone who is insane and is functioning out of that insanity to control others, to squeeze happiness out of samsara, you respect them. I'm not saying you do what they say. I'm not talking about obeying anybody. I don't obey anything. Well, maybe you know. So it is about, if I'm understanding the question, I'm saying that it shows up in a way that doesn't have any center to it. So therefore, if your environment, those in your environment call upon you in this situation, then you function with them with respect and with courtesy and with kindness. And if someone is if someone is a teacher functioning as a true teacher, which means they teach out of what this is rather than out of what they think about what this is, which means they don't think. I'm not saying they don't do some thinking, but not really, not particularly. They just meet everything where it's at. So it's I'm not sure if I've responded to your question in a way that's helpful to you. If you have a further one, I would try again. Sokuzan.
How is there continuity of a style if there's no continuity of a self?
Well, we think there is. We think there is a continuity of a self. So therefore, the continuity of the style just aligns itself with that and keeps trying to be the tool of that identity. But when the separate self is seen through, and it's not an event, so this will not happen to you. Because if it happens to you, then there's still a you that it happens to, and you're not. If you're collecting credentials, not going to happen. I'm not saying you can't collect a credential, but it will not be awakening. So then, in that situation, then that style may appear, may not. Fundamentally, every style is open to you. It's kind of an odd thing. You have another question? It's a good one, thank you. Further questions? Nishikai.
Is it helpful to boycott thoughts or return to the senses in an attempt to not meddle?
So Nishikai's asking if it's helpful to boycott thoughts or return to the senses in order to not meddle. I would say a little bit. A little bit. Trungpa Rinpoche taught boycotting and taught that kind of activity. I'd say a little bit. In other words, I sometimes say include if someone's having a lot of difficulty with some particular emotion or sitting, just holding still, looking at the wall, and it's just overwhelming and have no source for it, no explanation. I say you can do this alternating sense awareness practice where you're moving the awareness deliberately between the sense of touch and the sense of seeing. That tends to, because those are actually in what we call real time. You're actually body's in a room. Mind is rarely in a room. It's usually in, lost in space somewhere, and then invents its own reality and then buys into that. And it totally ignores the five senses that are completely concrete. This is why we have practices like sit down, hold still, watch what moves. And what does that put you right away? The body. It's holding still somewhat, but they're still breathing. There's lots of contrast. You can sometimes feel your heartbeat. And so picking out a couple of those senses could be the sense of sound, sense of seeing, could be the sense of smell. If you live in a bakery, you kind of live in a bakery, don't you? No, that's a noodle house, much different. Yeah, noodles are different shape. So you're in the noodle house and you have a really intense, angry feeling and you'd like to bite somebody, but you don't because you alternate between the sense of gravity, which you're standing up on the bottom of your feet, that's why they're flat, sort of pointed, standing there, gravity, and you smell this fragrance or this smell of chocolate noodles. I can tell you're smiling because your mask changes shapes. It's kind of like a, I don't know, I can't think of what it would be like. Pardon my lack of humor. Further questions from anyone out there in TV land?
Mr. Barry, there's a question from Kristen.
Yes.
What are practices or ways of being that benefit all beings?
Don't meddle, starting with your own mind. Don't meddle. Observe. Train your mind to see clearly so that the unobserved aspects of your consciousness as a living being, you don't go out into the world, which means across your living room to your mate or to your children, and laminate or project your unexamined or understood feelings and emotions on someone else. In other words, blame. Don't blame, even though they actually did something. Don't blame. Not a good idea. And that's difficult. I don't think it can be done without having a strong awareness practice. Sit down, hold still, watch what moves, and do an hour or two every day or whatever works for you. But if you want to save all beings, start with this one. Start with the person you are and stop torturing yourself. I'm not accusing you of anything. But if you're here and you're asking this question, there's some kind of confusion, because if you were clear about who you were, you would not be coming to this. Occasionally I'll be looking at the screen and the Buddha will appear and he'll say, oh, that's that guy again. I'm out of here. I don't need to hear that story again. No wonder he's not famous.
Teresa Bowen.
Yes, Teresa.
What can I do when I'm stuck in the God realm, thinking I know some revelation, whatever it is,
Yeah.
to soften coming out of it versus getting
Yeah.
jolted back into the hell realm?
Yeah. So there's quite a bit of awareness happening right there. And I would say just don't do anything with it. What you just described is awareness, and it's an intense form of it. This is going really well, I'm doing really good, and all of a sudden, wham, I'm in hell, or I'm in some kind of despair. All human beings are going through some kind of situation like that, and most of them are covering it up or blaming someone else or blaming everything. You can blame anything for this. Anything will live up to it to some extent. The downside of what you're describing is it sounds difficult. The upside of what you're describing is this is how it's done. Just don't do anything with that. Just observe that, because nothing lasts. One of the three marks of existence, one of them, the first one that the Buddha talked about, maybe the second one, is impermanence. Nothing lasts. So that means that whatever you're experiencing is not going to last, whether it's enlightenment or the God realm, or seeming enlightenment or seeming God realm, or the hell realm or the seeming hell realm. It can't last, but it will tend to continue if you fiddle with it or fight with it. So it's an odd thing, this whole non-duality thing, that everything is at once, has nothing to do with you, is totally none of your business, and everything is completely your responsibility. It's called what? Not to. But not to. So everything is, you're responsible for everything. All dharmas are without blame, but you're still responsible. You have to respond. And that response may be just received.
James, you're bowing. Another question from Susan in Traverse City.
Yes.
Why is the animal realm somehow inferior to the human realm?
To the what realm?
Inferior to the human realm.
Well, it's not inferior. It's just different. We've all been there. We're all going back there. Everybody's been a St. Bernard. Somewhat easier life than this one. And when I say that, don't believe a word I say. I'm just saying that the separation that you're seeing there is, that anyone is seeing there is imputed. In other words, you're making it up. The same way with thinking that dogs are having thoughts like humans are having. I'm not saying they're not having thoughts, but they're dog thoughts about humans. So it's not better, not worse. It's the animal realm, so it means that that area is a different level of existence and understanding. We would not have without, the human realm or this kind of intelligence or insight or being able to think abstractly, I guess would be a way of saying it. But some animals get very close to that. One time, many years ago, centuries ago, I took care of animals, monkeys, rhesus macaques, cynos, African greens, baboons. Pretty smart. They're so smart they know better than to try to be a human. Especially the baboons. They want no part of being a human. They'd rather make fun of you. They used to make fun of me. I'm not going to go into the story, but I'm just saying it's quite a bit also like dogs too. Their level of intelligence is really high. So I don't know, probably didn't respond to your question, but I just don't agree with it, that it's animals or less. It's just a different way of being. There's all kinds of beings that we don't even know about besides those different realms, all kinds of them. Should we close? Okay, we'll dedicate the merit. Thank you so much. It's good to be in the monastery for a change.
May the merit of this penetrate into all places, so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Jiho san chi ji son gu samo ko sa the 10 directions, the 3 worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna, Paramita. O Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions and the 3 times, please hear us. Please come down out of the light and protect SokukoJi Buddhist Temple Monastery, our Sangha, families, friends, and visitors. Heal everyone who is unhappy, sick, or suffering, and fill them with light.